Hang on, Matt's got.
If it's just going to take a minute, I would go.
Are we ready? Okay, we can go.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the December Franklin Community School Board meeting. As we do each month, please join us in a prayer before we start.
Lord, as we near the end of the semester and year, we thank you for the many blessings during this difficult year. We are thankful once again that we are able to meet in person tonight. We are truly blessed to have dedicated teachers and staff that have worked tirelessly these last 9 months. As we near the Christmas holidays, we ask that they may be a much-needed time of rest and rejuvenation, a time to reflect on the past year, to remember all the good things, and a time to spend with family and friends, whether in person or virtually. We thank you for the gift of your Son and the joy and hope of a new year. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you.
Amen.
So I'll call this meeting to order. First item on the agenda is open to public comments. Mrs. Betts. Give a minute. We don't have anything coming through the wire, so we'll check there. We'll go to the board comments. Any general comments for tonight?
We have one. Dr. Warland, you want to talk to us about the schedule on the agenda and where you'd like to talk about that?
Yes. On the consent agenda, under the reentry plan component, when we get to that point, we want to talk through the adjusted hybrid schedules for the middle school and the high school.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we'll go to the board subcommittees. Athletic Council, we have not met. Central 9. Ryan, that would be you.
Sorry, I did not go to the last meeting. David talked about in his Friday notes that they're planning to do some facility work, and so that'll have implications for us. And so, Dave, if there's more you want to say, happy to hand it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. So they are looking at going ahead and issuing an RFP for architectural firm to get a rendering and some actual hard costs so that they can come back to us. Ms. Gross and I talked today, and we think that we're going to ask Dr. Kovach to come to the February board meeting and talk about that building project when we talk about our finances for the picture for the year. I think it fits in well there. They will not do anything until the last part of 21. So really it's just information gathering. I will say though, the general consensus from the C9 schools, we are the only one that's really asking the question about, is this the best time to do this? And so just to keep everybody in the loop about that.
All right, thank you. Collective bargaining, we have not met. We're in, the contract is signed, so we're in good shape there. Communications?
We haven't met.
Okay. Legislative Council.
The next level teacher compensation was just released today. Part of Governor Holcomb's promise to look at teacher salaries. They have set the target of $60,000 of the average salary for teachers in Indiana, and looking at 37 different action items. The first few dealt with benefits. The number one that they brought up was pharmacy partnerships. So the state would pool all of us into a pharmacy plan to help reduce the cost. Also looking at spousal carve-out for all teachers' spouses throughout the state. So those were two of the highlights. Also asking the community to pass a referendum inside of that, which we've already done. They did make a suggestion that the referendum would shift a little bit. Instead of having an expiration date, it would not expire until someone in the community came and asked for it to be placed on the ballot to consider to expire, is one of the recommendations. So we'll see what happens out of legislation. It's going to take all parties to participate, but that did come out. I did send you that document, as well as I sent it to FCTA leadership, and I'm sure we'll have the next several months to have conversations about that.
Thank you. Mental health?
Mental health.
We haven't-
Yeah.
Music council?
Did not meet.
Okay, RDC.
We will be meeting Friday morning. They're getting ready to vote on some new TIF districts that will be in on the east side of town. This is property that was never annexed into the city until recently. So even though they will be pulling TIF money out of that, we will still be getting money that we've never gotten before on tax money for our referendum. So it's really not a bad situation for us. And hopefully down the road that will also bring in some new students.
Fantastic.
New businesses that will be out there, so.
Right, Superintendent's Strategic Council.
We didn't meet. We are meeting on January 7th and again January 6th and January 27th to review redistricting plans and also to unveil the first draft for the committee. I know Mrs. Nelson's on that for the board, so we'll see that. And then in February, we are bringing the redistricting draft maps for everybody to look at. We'll have them open for public display through the month of February and March, and then hopefully have that'll be the first tangible action of the strategic plan. Will be redistricting, so we can get that information out to parents. So we're definitely making some headway, and I'm excited about that. And Dr. Aziz is here. She is consulting and working with us as part of the strategic plan as we look at increasing our exposure and opportunities through diversity and inclusion. And you'll hear more about that. So we're starting to see some of the fruition of our work from last year now that we're getting out of the COVID fog, hopefully, and moving forward.
David, would the redistricting start in August?
It would start. We would try to get it in August. Yes. If we needed another year based on community input because of COVID, we could do that. We're trying to balance also the transportation, right? It continues to still be a stressor, but the target is August right now. Worst case would be a year from August. So August of 22 would be the latest I'd want to do it.
All right, just because we had troubles on the startup, I'll go back. Robin, any comments, public comments? Thank you. All right, moving to the next agenda item under recognition or individual student growth.
Yes, again, one of our favorite times at our meetings. I'm so glad we brought this back. We're going to start tonight. There are 3 different areas, but we're going to start with 2021 Olympic trials. Yes, I said Olympic trials. Franklin Community High School senior Cade Oliver competed in the U.S. Open where he qualified for the 2021 Olympic trials in 3 events: the 100 backstroke, the 200 backstroke, and the 200 IM. In the 2021 Olympic trials event, this event is the deciding meet to qualify for the U.S. Olympic team, which will compete in Tokyo, Japan during the summer of 2021. Congratulations to Cade and to his family. That is outstanding. Yay.
That's awesome.
Another outstanding
Just really quick, do we know when the trials are? I mean, when will he be swimming? Do we know?
I think they're in June.
Okay.
I looked it up tonight. Natalie and I were discussing it. The 13th through the 20th in Omaha, Nebraska.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, it's so exciting.
Yeah.
That was awesome. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
More exciting news. This is fantastic as well. Franklin Community High School junior Hannah King scored a perfect score on her math SAT and a score of 770 out of 800 on her evidence-based reading and writing. Wow. Outstanding. Congratulations to Hannah and to her family as well. Each month, C9 asks their instructors to identify students who have shown character and work ethic to be named Student of the Month in each of their programs. For the month of December, we have 3 high school students that we would like to recognize: Quentin Rodriguez in Criminal Justice, Delaney Johnston in Health Sciences, and Peyton Tharp in Welding Technology. Again, outstanding. These students were recognized for character and work ethic. That's really exciting. So congratulations to all of these students. And we have more exciting news coming our way in January. So we're excited with more to share.
Well, we'll come back for that. All right, moving to the next agenda item, our consent agenda. And tonight we've got a long list of items that are included there, and I'd like to highlight just a couple. First, we have our attorney engagement agreement. I'm happy to say that we're going to extend Roger's contract and keep him on with the board yet for another term. So, Roger, I hope that's good news for you. But we
Well, I'm happy that you're happy to say it.
Yeah, but we thank you for all the support that you've given us. So look forward to that continued engagement there.
Well, thank you very much. I consider it an honor and a privilege.
Thank you. The second item is under the personnel report. We've got two ladies that are retiring there. First out of our Creekside is Mrs. Etter with 22 years of service, and then out in Northwood, Mrs. Winning with 25 years of service. Just want to extend a big thank you to both of those ladies for all of your work, your support over the years, and what you've done for Franklin. So thank you for that. And then also under the consent agenda, we have the reentry plans that Mrs. Worland wanted to discuss. So Dr. Worland, if you'd like to take up.
Yes, thank you. Natalie, do you mind, well, or maybe everybody can just click. There is a spring semester schedule slideshow in that area of the agenda. If you would, everyone please go to the very last slide. We're actually going to look at this backwards, I think. In some regards, it makes more sense, I think, that way. When you look at this slide, as we jump into scheduling, scheduling honestly has taken up a lot of time this year for a lot of people. And I think we can thank COVID for that. But we've been having scheduling conversations since probably July. And the current reentry plan that we have, Phase 2 was designed for our secondary folks in order to help us accommodate our block schedule at the high school. So when you look at the high school schedule, it actually looks very similar, except for really two components. In talking with parents, many of you have heard from parents, Dr. Clendenning and I both have heard from parents. Couple of things that were mentioned, is there a way for us to get students back in the building all 5 days? We've had that conversation at these tables. So yes, if we're in a hybrid situation, and as Dr. Mormon has said, we can't have every student in the building, which was part of the conflict with our current, was it Phase 3 plan? So this allows us to have students in the building every day. We did flip the two groups. So if you were originally A through K, you came on Monday, Tuesday. Are you all with me so far? And then if you were at the end of the alphabet, you were there on Thursday, Friday. Due to parent feedback that there are pros and cons to being in the school building on a Friday before exciting things happen on a weekend or teacher fatigue at the end of the week, we flipped those two groups. So instead of blue attending at the beginning of the week, it's now white, and blue is at the end of the week. Okay? The teachers voted, and the alternating day is on Wednesday for the high school. They are going to run a 7-period day that day in order to accommodate the block. Still allow students to see their teachers an additional day that week. So that's what you're looking at. And I wanted to start there because it looks fairly similar to what we have right now. Other things that I just want to point out, we are inviting back our students who have a 504, have an IEP back into our buildings on a more regular basis, in many cases 5 days a week, in order to ensure that we can meet their needs if that's necessary for that particular student. Keep in mind we're also running the tutoring sessions Sunday through Thursday evenings for students in our secondary environment, and we had the SAT course again in the fall. Now, I'm going to ask that you transition to the spring, which is actually slide 2, or I'm sorry, middle school. Can you all see that one? When we met with FCTA and did a survey with our teachers, it became very apparent that the middle school, as many of you know, middle school environments are different. The teachers said, we need to see these students more frequently for their academic well-being and their social-emotional well-being. These gaps of 5 days that we approved in the prior phase 2, which was built around the high school block schedule, this is not working for our kids. We need to see them more often to really hold them more accountable. And it will help improve their academic and their social well-being. The real worry, frankly, was student success. You know, it's interesting, based upon that argument, I happen to have a middle school student and know some other middle school students, and I just said, talk to me about the schedule. If you had a preference, what would it be? And I heard from every individual student I talked to, you know, we probably more often, more frequently, not these large gaps. I had one student say to me, you know, we probably need a little bit more accountability. I thought, oh, well, good for you. So this schedule, which is why I chose it second, looks a little bit different, okay? I do want to point out, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, these students are consistent with the high school. So what will be different for our families is the Tuesday and the Thursday, okay? So I want to just make sure that's clear. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, they're on the same schedule. Tuesday and Thursdays are different. We felt like the teachers had a sound argument for why they wanted to make this adjustment for the middle school students. And so I just wanted to make sure I explained this to everyone. So I'm happy to entertain questions if you have them.
I do. Which part of the alphabet is the white and which one's blue?
Yes.
I don't see that on this slide.
Yes, and it's the same as what it currently is right now, Becky, so that's a great question. So the blue are AK, the white are the LZ. And again, Becky, I'm glad you asked that because we did flip those days, just like we did at the high school, again, to address some parent concerns about my child's never in the building on a Monday or my child's never in the building on a Friday. And there are pros and cons maybe to those two locations. So same thing, Becky. Thank you for asking. And again, kids are in the building all 5 days. And we're still honoring the request from Dr. Mormon to not have every student in the building any of those days. Now the hope is that we're in this hybrid situation briefly come the spring semester. We can get back to yellow and get everybody in the building and get moving. Ideally, we want every student in the building all day long. That's where we want to be.
Any other questions for Dr. Worland? All right, so coming back to the consent agenda, do I have a motion for the agenda?
I'll move for approval.
Thank you, Christy. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Brian. Ryan Wagner, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Brian?
Yes.
Christy?
Yes.
Becky?
Yes.
And I vote yes. The consent agenda passes and all items under it. We'll move to the next agenda item, which is the superintendent reports. And the first is the teacher appreciation grant distribution. Mrs. Gross.
Yes, I just wanted to circle back on this because I believe the last time we met, we didn't have actual numbers for the teachers. So we received a total of $184,000 for the teacher appreciation grant. We had to distribute small portions of that to C9 and Earlywood, leaving us about $173,000 to divide among our own teachers. So that equated to $530.42 for effective teachers and $707.23 to all highly effective teachers. And that was dispersed on December 5th, along with the support salary stipends. That's all I had, Mr. Lamb.
Thank you. Move to the next item with Dr. Aziz and Dr. Worland.
Would you like to introduce her?
Absolutely. Everyone, I would like to introduce Dr. Aziz. You can see her there on the screen. She is, hello. We actually met Dr. Aziz, Dr. Clendenning, and I during a class that was sponsored by the Indiana Department of Education. And Dr. Aziz facilitated that class. We met every other week for 10 weeks for a book discussion and an online course. And we were so impressed with her approach and her philosophy, just her collegiality. We invited her to meet with us, and Ryan joined in with us, and we had a conversation, and then started progressing from there. And you will see her proposal on the agenda tonight. But she is here with us to introduce herself and share a little bit about what she's envisioning and open it up for questions. So, Dr. Aziz.
Thank you, Brooke, for the introduction, and nice to meet you all virtually, Franklin Community Board members and community members. So it is my honor to join you tonight. As Brooke said, we had a great time in our book study a few weeks, that ended a few weeks ago, and as part of that book study, I learned about many of the outstanding things that you all have already begun to do and plan to do in Franklin Community Schools around equity. My background is in that area. I studied at IU under Dr. Ruskiba, who is a national researcher around issues of equity, and I've been doing that work for over 20 years now. I'm an educator like some of you. I am trained officially as a school psychologist, and I practiced in public schools for many years before I transitioned to state level work and worked at the Department of Education before I started my own company, Virtuoso. And at Virtuoso, we spend our days, every day, supporting educators across the nation to meet the needs of all kids. So I am excited to join you this evening just to share a little bit about some of our brainstorming around how I can support you all as you continue to try to find ways to execute pieces of your strategic plan. So I'm calling this chat with you for these few minutes as kind of laying a foundation for equity in Franklin Community Schools. I know that you have some very big goals. I know that you started some great work with diversity, equity, and inclusion committees already. You've been having these conversations, and still here, you are looking to add a director to help you with this work. And so I just want to strategically, as I say, lay the foundation so when that person comes, you can hit the ground running, because the time to really be intentional about this work is now. So with that said, I just want to take a couple minutes to share a couple of thoughts with you. The first point I want to make is when we are thinking about equity, I feel like it's going to be really important for you as board members and community members to have clarity on what that means. You want to be aiming toward educational equity, which is, I use the definition from Dr. Glenn Singleton, who says educational equity is raising the achievement of all of your students in Franklin Township, every single one of them, while narrowing the gap between the highest and lowest performing student groups. And as you do that, what you want to try to do is eliminate the predictability of who's going to be at the highest and lowest end. I make that point because sometimes when we talk about equity, people who are unfamiliar with the work and the journey associate equity with a particular group of students, and most typically that's racial minorities. And while you do want to think about how your work in Franklin Township is benefiting students of color particularly, this work is about benefiting all. And I think that's a message that you want to communicate loud and clear as you prepare to have a director join you and continue this work long term. Now, as you try to reach educational equity, what we are really good at Virtuoso is helping districts review in a comprehensive way policies, practices, and procedures that are currently in place, and consider the degree to which all students are benefiting from those policies, practices, and procedures, and who may be left out or being left behind in those things. And that's a very purposeful process. And as I talk to you about those three things, policies, practices, and procedures, as board members and community members and administrators who are there tonight, you want to know that this is, an ebb and flow kind of journey. It's not linear. There's going to be some things you celebrate and some low points. There are going to be hard conversations. That's part of it. And we've got to be open to that journey along the way. So that just gives some context about some of the things that I've proposed in this next 5, 6, 7 months of work with you. So when I think about this journey, right, the one that's an ebb and flow, peaks and valleys, I really have approached this engagement really with the focus of, if I were the director coming to Franklin Community Schools in just a few months, what would I need? What would I need in order to make sure that I could support the execution of all of your strategic plan goals with an equity focus? And if I were that person, I would want to make sure that I have a group of stakeholders that is well versed in what this journey means, and that they have the mindset, the skill set, and the tool set to join me on this path. And so that is really what I have suggested for you all starting second semester into the summer. When I talk about a mindset of educational equity, it is really having conversations about what are our beliefs, not only our beliefs, what are our actions that are actively focused on how we are either dismantling things that aren't working for kids or sustaining them. So it's not only our ideas about things, but it's also our actions. Sometimes our ideas and our actions are mismatched. So we want to explore both of those from a mindset perspective. The next phase is around a skill set. And so what I propose to do is support some key stakeholders in developing awareness and abilities that are required for people to take a critical look at those policies, practices, and procedures. You have to have the skill set to know how to do that well. I rarely see any educators or board members or community members that don't want the best for their setting, but intention doesn't always equal the kind of impact that you want. So I want to merge those two. I can only imagine, I had the first part of intention in place, right? You all are well intended. I want to make sure that you also have the skill set to get the impact that you want for your students. And then the final thing is tool set. And sometimes that's the practical things that teachers want right now. Just tell me what to do, I'll do it, right? The tool set of culturally responsive practices. And so that's another thing that we want to begin to develop and introduce to your community. Those methodologies that will support us meeting the needs of all students. So let me just jump right into the process. I have proposed 4 major actions. activities. I'm calling these like focus areas. The first is targeted focus groups. And activities as interviews with key stakeholders to help us understand what are the strengths that are currently in place, that are working well for all student groups, and what are those opportunities for growth. I want to start that process with various stakeholders. Typically, those are staff from different levels in your district, including elementary, middle, high, both certified and classified staff members. We usually try to get families, administrators, board members, key community members. So again, key stakeholders that you all would identify. This is a co-generative process, and I'm facilitating, but I want our dialogue to be transparent and open so that I know that I'm seeing your needs. But we want critical conversations with these folks to explore what's their reality. And we want to do that right away so that when we're moving through the other phases of the process of laying the foundation, we take those pieces of information that we gather from your stakeholders to be intentional about what we discuss, what the problem solves around. The second piece is leadership development. And in this focus area, what I propose to do is provide an assessment to, again, those folks that you identify. I would imagine your current diversity, equity, inclusion committee members, the board. I invite you to consider this as well. Key stakeholders that might also be included are your building level administrators, because again, remember, we're trying to develop the skill set at this point. And so we want to make sure that folks have the know-how and an understanding of what it means to think from an equity mindset. And so this assessment is called the Intercultural Developmental Inventory. And you take it on your own, and it gives you your current level of intercultural competence. And there's a 5-point scale for that. But the benefit of that is that we can quantify where we are right now in Franklin, where we could go as it relates to our mindset and skill set around an equity orientation. And from that assessment, score that's like, oh, that's where I like it or I don't. But you also get an action plan, because this work is about personal development as well, so that you can really get to that equity-oriented mindset. And so there's a customized action plan just for you, based on your scores, that will help you become more culturally responsive if you decide to take that journey. And then the meat of the proposal is really intensive review, assessment, problem solving around your current policies, practices, and procedures. So I am proposing that we all do kind of a facilitated, it's more than a book study, because we're going to be putting some action behind what we discover. So it's really a course, right? We're going to be using the text, Culturally Persistent Inquiries. I like that book because it has already rubrics in the book that kind of help us establish, will help us be able to identify maybe where we are and where we desire to be, and we can be very specific on how to get there. So that book, I intend to support key leaders in learning, understanding, and applying. So they're going to get some tasks in between our meetings. I propose that we meet monthly, and the end result will be some very specific actions about improvements we need to make around assessment, around professional development, around curriculum instruction, around sample engagement. So that's going to be a really powerful tool as you continue to work through your strategic and goals. And then the final thing, getting to the tool set, is really to make sure that all of your community of educators in Franklin start to have some beginning level awareness around the impact that culture has on learning and behavior, and the ways in which our biases, which we all have, can impact educational outcomes. So we are going to provide two modules that will live with you forevermore. They're not just a one-time and done. I'm going to record those and have facilitated discussion questions so that your school community can use that, can rewatch, can think, reflect, along with some activities that go along with those things. So we're going to do a couple of those. One first is on the instructional and behavioral practices, and the other very specifically focused on bias. If we are able to do all these things with your approval, I really believe that in the end result, when we finish this project around June, we'll have a very specific list of action steps that will carry you forward to the next school year, and a very specific entry point for that director to carry on first. I'll be honest and transparent. One of the things I did not want to do as a part of my engagement with you was come in and teach a very specific framework, because whoever you decide is your next director will have their particular framework around navigating this equity journey. And if that's the right person for you, you want them to have room to execute that. And I was very intentional about writing an action plan for you that would, again, just be foundational and not interfere with whatever the particular approach that person will decide to take. These are skill sets that are going to carry through regardless. So that's kind of the big picture, and I'm happy to now or at a later time answer questions, comments, or hear your reflections about the ideas, your worries, any of that. Thank you for allowing me a chance to share with you.
So Dr. Aziz, this is Andy Lamb. Just a question. As you described your process, can you tell me a little bit more? What do you foresee the journey to be? What's that time period again? And how does COVID and some of the altered schedules, how do we need to adjust to that plan?
Yeah, great point. So COVID, since March, everything that my team and I have done has been virtually. So we have become the experts on this journey as much as you can be an expert. So, but to your point, Mr. Lamb, how does this affect pieces of this plan? I've written this plan to be something that we can execute virtually completely. So we have learned to do focus groups well virtually, but through the use of breakout sessions, breakout rooms, and have been successful with the transcribing and feedback around that. In terms of the leadership development, you know, those folks are already meeting virtually. I just want to come alongside what their current framework is. And I should say the targeted focus group and that initial assessment of intercultural competence I want to do early on in the semester, like January, February. And then for the review of the policies and practices using the text that I mentioned, that's going to kind of be a monthly meeting with some interim tasks that folks do independently and bring back to report out on, you know, like how you all reported out on your community, on your committees to start the meeting today. And all of that, again, is virtually. Brooke mentioned that when we were doing our book study through IDOE, we used an online classroom. We used Google Classroom. We could use any of those formats as well to house materials, to make sure that folks are aware of all the resources and communicating and following through with the expectations. And again, the modules that I'm going to do are going to be virtually as well, so we can provide a format for those. Usually we do some unlisted YouTube links, but you can post them however, on whatever format works for you in Franklin. I hope that answers your question.
It did, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions?
Yeah, this is Brian Wirtz. Thanks for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to a continued engagement. But I did have a real simple question. You talked about a book, but I didn't catch the name of it that you said you did a book study on. What was the name of the book?
Okay, so the one that we did as a part of IDOE was called Is Everyone Really Equal? That might not be what you mean though. The book that I'm going to propose that we work on in Franklin is called Culturally Proficient Inquiry. Both are great. And as board members, if you could read both, please do.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then Dr. Aziz, Andy Lamb again, just a pet peeve of mine, but it's something, as you did your homework, your background preparing for this, you mentioned a couple of times in addressing us that Franklin Township, and we're 25 miles south of there, so I just want to make sure that you're not confusing us with that community up north.
Well, let me tell you what. So it works for both of you because whenever I'm in Franklin Township, I pull up Franklin community data because it comes up first. And I will do better with your grade.
No, I just, like I said, need to make sure that you got the right area.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we also have a second book. She mentioned Dr. Singleton and her description of equity, and we also have that book that Brooke and I have given to the DI committee, Multicultural Equity Committee, and we'll pass that one along to you as well, because that's actually a very good book just on understanding the journey. And so we have both of those books, and we'll make sure that you get them once we move forward with this.
And I really hope that as board members, you'll join us on this journey. I've worked with several boards in different districts, and the extent to which you can fully understand the journey that your staff will be expected to take, I think the better your decision making can be, in terms of how to support them and thinking ahead about how you need to make the really critical decisions that you'll need to make. So please join us.
Well, again, thank you for joining us this evening.
Sure. Thanks for having me again. Any questions that come up, folks know how to get a hold of me. I'm happy to answer any questions. So I look forward to working with you all if that's your decision, and again, answering any questions you have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Night.
All right, we'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is under action items. And the first item is the proposed amendment to our superintendent's contract. So I need to put the board meeting on hold. I need to open a public hearing on the contract. I failed to include, when I read the superintendent's contract, is that in November?
Yep.
In November, I left a clause out. So I need to add to his contract this clause: the superintendent shall receive a stipend of $1,669.72 for the 2020-2021 school year in support of the extra work that he's done leading us through the COVID-19 issues, as well as all the other support work that has driven the school system to follow. So with that addition, and Dr. Clendenning, I apologize for missing that in November, but it will be a one-time, one-year stipend for that. So Mrs. Betts, I'll open up for comments. If there's anybody online that would like to make a comment, we'll give a couple of minutes for that.
Mr. Lamb, I did want to mention there's about a 30-second lag between the live meeting and the feed. So I'm going to give them just a little bit of time so that they can catch up with what you just mentioned, and then I'll let you know.
Thank you. Okay. So with that, I'll move to the board. I'd like to make a motion for the approval of this amendment. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Becky. Ryan Wagner, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Brian?
Yes.
Christy?
Yes.
Becky?
Yes.
And I vote yes. That motion passes. Thank you, Dr. Clendenning.
Thank you.
So we will close the public hearing, move back to the board meeting, and the next item under action items is our policies, the second reading there.
Thank you, Mr. Lamb. In the past years, we've had reduction in force inside of a handbook because of something that took place back in the early teens of 2000 when Tony Bennett was still leading the charge. We pulled this out of our master agreement. Based on some court law and actions, we believe it's best now to move this into policy in regard to reduction in force. It's actually how we practice the reduction in force. We've only had to do it twice in my 12 years, and I hope we never have to do it. But this allows it to be anchored in policy for everyone. And so tonight, we're bringing this back. We did meet with FCTA. We walked through it. We even talked again today during discussion about this. They fully support this and the process of how we would go about a reduction in force if we would have to based on finances. And you can see with the green highlights, but really there on the second page, it comes down to evaluation, ineffective, improvement necessary, the first two, and that's by state law. And then you have to have valid certification. One of the things that's happened over the past several years, we're seeing people that come in either with emergency license or they let their license expire. If that were to happen, they would be next in the line of reduction in force. And then it would go to length of service in our district, total teaching experience, with the exception of head coaches. There's some people that we hire in, and the FCTA realizes that if we hire a head football coach for 1 year and we have to have a reduction in force, we can't really add that person to being on the RIF list. So they actually set aside, or basketball, or some other program that we would have inside of that. Previous teaching assignments and other criteria warranted by special circumstances. Ultimately, it's still going to end up coming down to probably that first-year teacher, unfortunately, in the journey. We hate that. We don't want to see it. We don't want to RIF. But this policy allows us to have it anchored inside of Neola and allows everyone to be observant of it and be in full transparency. So I would ask board approval at this time.
Any questions for Dr. Clendenning?
I don't have a question, but just so we reiterate, David, this is just a policy. This is not in anticipation of anything happening.
No, it's not in anticipation of anything happening. I think we're going to, we've talked about that before. This is just a policy, and it just, unfortunately, it comes up in this natural process right now.
Right.
And so, thank you very much for clarifying that. And we made that clear also to FCTA when we met with them that this was not a prelude to anything. It was just anchoring it in the process steps.
All right, do I have a motion?
Move for approval.
Thank you, Brian. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Christy. Ryan Wagner, how do you vote?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Christy?
Yes.
Becky?
Yes.
And I vote yes, the motion passes. Next item is our resolution ordinance to transfer appropriations. Ms. Gross.
Yes, I have a couple of resolutions as a part of year-end close. The first one before the board authorizes myself as the treasurer to pay all of the outstanding claims and transfer any appropriations necessary within education operations and debt service. If this happens, I will report at the January board meeting what those transactions look like and what appropriations were transferred.
All right, any questions? Do I have a motion?
I'll move for approval.
Thank you, Christy. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Becky. Ryan Wagner, how do you vote?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Christy?
Yes.
Becky?
Yes.
And I vote yes, that motion passes. Your next resolution.
This one's a little more specific. This is around the referendum fund and the stipends that the board approved to pay for the support staff. And this is just moving the money within the referendum fund to the different accounts to post to the right accounting number in the system. So I am asking for authorization to move those funds from the first account and 39,000 and then distribute it among those 4 accounts.
Move for approval.
Thank you, Brian. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Christy. Ryan Wagner, how do you vote?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Christy?
Yes.
Becky?
Yes.
I vote yes, that motion passes. Thank you, Mrs. Gross.
Thank you.
All right, moving to the next item is discussion. And we have policies, our first reading there.
We have 3 tonight. Policy 2260, non-discrimination, access to equal education opportunities, change in the compliance officer to the director of special ed. So Jen Scott would now be our person, and that's just a clarifying point. But policy 2266 is one that we really need to have a discussion on. I want to thank Ryan. Several weeks ago, we actually probably spent an hour just on this one alone with Brooke and I, going through the new Title IX, and that is the gender equity federal law. Under the Trump administration, it changed dramatically, and some steps that were needed. And so the policy is now catching up to Title IX that took place in August of this year. And so this first reading goes through that. Ryan has been through that. We've also sent it to Roger Young for 2 definitions that we needed to clarify, and he did provide that clarity. And so tonight, I would ask you please read this, because this is one that really, as we travel over the next several years, someone that we'll have to look at. And one of the things that it goes into detail about is kind of the whole investigation changes, the process structures around it, and also who's the final decision maker here. And in the past, we've not allowed appeals for expulsions and those type things. So if we would have an appeal based on the hearing, it would go to the courts. Those things are outlined in that. So please review that. Like I said, I want to thank Ryan. He actually traveled this road with us, and Brooke and I. So this is the first time you've had a chance to read it, but it is a long addition to this policy. So please, any questions, let me know.
One question that I had when I read through this, several of the sections you've changed Title IX coordinator to Title IX officer. Will that drive a change in our org structure, our personnel that we'll have to make?
It will not. It just allows us to give a more official title. Actually, one thing Brooke and I have been talking about is the new position of Director of Diversity and Inclusion. They would come in and help with this section.
Okay.
And so that's why we listed officer instead of coordinator. It's just a more formal structure for us is what we were feeling like that would be a better way to define it in our district.
All right, thank you.
And the last one is just federal compliance with the Edgar Act around finances.
All right, the next item is the Virtuoso Consulting contract. There's no contract attached there. So my question was, has Roger looked at this and reviewed it?
He has not. So tonight, what you see above you in the superintendent's report is a description of the work.
Right.
We will then come back with the actual thing for Roger to review. We do not have that for him. This was just her proposal to us. So we'll get the actual wording, but this is for you to see what she was proposing and timeline structures for that.
So my question then would come back to think about so we would have to review the contract in January, and then potentially sign it in February. So what's that journey look like? I thought Dr. Aziz was saying wrap up by June, right? Can you do that between February and June? That seems like a lot of work in a short period of time. So, just think about that as we think through the timeline here, but without a contract in place to review, I want to make sure Roger has enough time to see it. And then what's that journey look like for us? And do we need to adjust her proposal to match our needs?
And she's willing to do that. Oh, sorry, Ryan.
Sorry, Brooke. Go ahead, Brooke.
She's willing to adapt to whatever we need her to do. She actually proposed that aggressive timeline, doing an initial introductory meeting. Here I am at the end of January and starting the work in February through the month of June.
Okay.
But we can adjust if we need to. I think what we're hearing then is go ahead and talk with her about a contract,
Yes.
move forward then.
Get the final definition. Ryan had a question, I think.
Well, I was just going to say, if Roger's good with it and we have time to look at it before the next meeting, can't we move it to an action item? I mean, we've done that before. We've reviewed something in the meeting and then moved it and voted on it in the same meeting in January.
We could. I'm concerned about that journey, about the timing, that we're going to put ourselves under contract for a lot of work, and if we still have COVID going on, that throws more difficulties in the process. I just want to make sure that we've thought that out. So again, I haven't seen that timeline that we're talking about. It's in her proposal about June, but I wasn't clear on that until she answered the question. So I just want to see those details.
And I would agree, she's very flexible. Brooke will be the point for us, for the district, to interact with her. We've got meetings set up to engage her in conversations. Also, Ryan's been a part of the journey. He'll continue to be part of the diversity and inclusion conversation. She is willing and able to help us meet our needs, and if it needs to be back one more month, that's fine. If it goes into August, that's fine. She just wants us to get what we want.
Sure.
So I would say if there's anything inside of if you go back to superintendent's report, that attachment on leadership development, if you see anything in there that concerns you or that you want more clarity, would you please email Brooke and we'll get that to Dr. Aziz. And then we will, probably around the turn of 21, to get to Roger the document that goes through everything and move forward.
Yeah, and I tell you right now, as I go back to her document, when she mentioned that she would put together 2 virtual PD sessions to answer those questions, one concern I have is that we will want the Franklin team to be educated, more mature before they come in to ask those questions, right? They're going to have to know what questions to ask, more details around that, right? So again, it's that timing, that roadmap that I'm concerned about. Making sure that we get the value for the contract.
And one of the things that we did talk about today was, I'd like for us to get back to our retreats in the summer, when we're in person, and we talked about having Dr. Aziz be the keynote, that she would spend the entire 8 hours with us, talking about her work and also laying the foundation as we move forward. So we did lay that out there. You don't see that in this proposal, but she said she'd be more than happy to do that in the conversation. So we can get all those things finalized. Once again, I said Brooke will be the point person. So please email Dr. Warden with any questions or comments. We'll get those to Dr. Aziz and then on to Mr. Young.
Yeah, she's great, and I'm excited about this. I think it's going to be really good for all of us.
Yeah, she's really...
Okay, I'll open it up to next item is our board administrative comments. open it up to the board if there's any comments on the topics tonight. In general? Ryan, you good?
Good.
David?
Yeah, I just have a couple things. One, I want to thank the board for continuing to trust and allow the teachers to do what's best in this COVID era. It is, the stress continues to mount on all of our teachers and our bus drivers and custodian, cafeteria workers. I just want to say thank you to the board for that trust. I will tell you that as that tension comes up, there's questions about continuing to reach out and engage in conversation with people, and we're definitely looking to do that. And one of the questions came up was, how about parents? Have you reached out to parents yet? And we talked about reaching out to parents, and we want to reach out to parents, but we also we asked the question of ourselves, when we ask a question of the parents, can we change to what they may want based on the parameters? For example, if they said, we want everybody to come back and we're in orange, we can't meet that. So we didn't ask that question. But I do think in early 2021, we will reach out to moms and dads and talk about the journey of COVID. Because one of the things I want everybody to know is once we get to yellow, the intention right now is to bring students back to school. The only question will be either 4 days a week or 5 days a week, and that's going to be predicated on the custodial and transportation needs. And if we can do the things safely, and we know that we're not the great spreader, we will do that. We're not trying to hide anything from moms and dads or the community. We're trying to be very transparent in our journey with our website and everything. But I did want the board to know, because I'm sure you probably get people calling you and saying, what happened here? What's this thought? This new hybrid schedule was answering getting kids one more day back. And when you look at it, it's 2 days in a month, right? In a 4-week cycle, it's only 2 days, but it's one more day back. So I think that's our, the baby steps. And if we can get the yellow, we'll do that. So I go back to the parents, community. If you want to help us, the absolute best thing you can do, wear your mask, stay socially distant, and please just wash your hands. Those 3 simple things will help us. We'll come back to school. We already know that we're looking at, into the summer, we will be offering a more robust summer school. We don't know what that looks like. We've talked about it. I asked Ms. Gross the other day, can you begin thinking about some dollars? And she just kind of looked at me like, are you kidding? No. She said, but we will. We realize we have to do some things differently as we head into 2021, 22. And so we want moms and dads in the community to know that we're in this journey with them. I mean, the pandemic has caused a lot of stress. We are going to get through this. We did receive a survey on Friday about our teachers getting the vaccine. And I know Mrs. Nelson's here. I had to fill out a survey. There are 733 members of our faculty and staff that were listed as critical employees that once they get to that phase 2 of the distribution, they'll be up. Now, it's not going to be mandatory, but it will be available to them. And so we're in that pipeline. So we're seeing the end of this thing, hopefully, when we get to April, March, April, May, and then come back to school. But once we get to yellow, we're coming back to school. I want moms and dads to know that. So hopefully, what I'm hearing is we're going to go back to orange this Wednesday, based on the positivity rate slipping down to about 13%. And then we get to the winter break, and then, we'll see what happens. But we're going to come back to school, but I want everybody to know that we are looking at conversation points. Flipping the alphabet came from parents. It didn't, Dr. Worland didn't wake up and say, hey, Dr. C, move the schedule. It was really moms and dads, but it wasn't a survey that we sent out, so I think you probably are getting maybe some questions about that. We are wanting to respond, and we will, but we want to make sure that we can do it earnestly and thoughtfully in our journey.
One other thing to piggyback on that, you will see in January on the reentry plans a recommendation to bring back our PLC structure at the K through 6 level. We have had teachers reaching out. They have not had that collaboration time, They really want that time back. And so we had suspended it for the fall semester because there were so many unknowns. So we're looking at K through 6 to start around January 20th. So that gives families some time now to think about their needs for that early release. This same thing we've done in the past, we would normally do every year, to start that back K through 6 starting on January 20th. So you'll see that amendment come through on the reentry plans in January, at the January meeting.
And talk about secondary, PLC.
Secondary has been finding creative ways to do PLCing this fall semester, given they had some of that flexibility. As long as we stay in the hybrid, we don't want to add one more thing for parents to think about. So we're not going to have that official time. Now, I do think teachers will continue to find creative ways to collaborate and talk, and that's a key part of what we do. So this is only a temporary suspension. I want to be very clear about that because the research says it's critical to professional growth and use of data in instruction. If we happen to get back to a more normal life at some point in the spring, we may open that conversation again, but we're not ready to have that conversation right now for the secondary level. We feel as though they've had some of that opportunity, and we really need to focus right now on our K through 6 teachers.
And Cub Care may be available.
And yes, we want to delay the start of that to after the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, allowing families time to accommodate that change. If not, we're going to try to collaborate with our Cub Care opportunity after school. Yeah, but I want to give everybody a heads up on that.
Thank you. That moves us right into the next item, is the calendar.
We have Christmas break coming up, obviously winter break, December 18th through the 4th. And then registration is coming up for Cub Academy again in February. Also, I've been engaged in a conversation with Mr. Ahaus. I know that Ms. Gross as well. We would like to recommend that graduation be outside again on the football field. We are looking at that last Friday, I think it's May 29th, if my date is correct. One thing we may have to look at is creating a line item in the budget of 22, and this year we're going to ask Tina to do her magic and find them some money, but we're going to need some money to make sure that we can pull off, like we did last year, the graduation. So if you have any questions or comments about that, please let us know. But Steve felt like in this COVID era, also in how we did life, it worked out pretty well for parents and for kids. It would still be an evening event on the 29th, and then rain, etc., on that weekend as well. So please mark your calendars for that as we begin to think about graduation for the class of 21.
Thank you. All right, Mrs. Betts, any public comments?
Okay, Laura Alexander asked, back when Dr. Aziz was presenting the proposal on behalf of Virtuoso Leadership, she wanted to confirm that we were creating a new position for Director of Diversity and Inclusion, and if so, how does that fit into the budget?
The plan is to create a new position, and we have budgeted that in the 21 budget that Ms. Gross put together. It's an actual line item in there.
Thank you. Amanda Ott asks regarding the second semester schedule for grades 7 through 12, how will cleaning take place now that there is no Wednesdays for them to clean?
Mr. Sewell, did you hear that? Or do you want to come up?
Good evening. That's a great question. Our custodians are able to adjust their schedules quite a bit to work in different shifts. So we would utilize a number of different approaches, including how we schedule and when that cleaning takes place. We're also using some new products that help us to have sanitizing that lasts a longer duration, and that also will allow us to be more efficient with our cleaning time.
Okay, I know this is regarding when you were speaking about why there was no input from parents. Christine Trimpe asks, actually she just said it's not necessary to change the days that students are attending in order to recoup an extra day. Does that make sense? How we're flip-flopping blue, when blue attends, when white attends. Okay. Just a comment from Gretchen Honeycutt. The schedule makes it more challenging for parents who have students in both the middle and high school. Sorry, I'm reading. Michael Spongeberg asks, how are teachers going to respond to not having the Wednesday as a planning/catch-up day? At the 7th and 8th grade level, it seems that teachers are stressed and overworked trying to teach hybrid.
Dr. Worland, do you want to answer that?
Do you want me to answer that? Sure. Thank you for the question. Actually, it's interesting. When you talk to teachers, we have a number of them who are ready to have students in the building. I think it really depends upon maybe who you talk to and what content they're delivering. Keep in mind that even when we had the virtual day, we were still delivering instruction. It was an instructional day. Now, many teachers scheduled their time so that if they wanted to meet with colleagues for PLC time or use that time in creative ways, that was happening. But in conversations with FCTA, to be honest, Robin, and I think Michael, the question came from Michael, there was never a question brought to that group looking at that schedule about, hey, you know what, wait, stop. We don't want to do that. We were all in sync with FCTA that anytime we can get students back in the building more often is a good thing. Did I miss anything, Dr. Clendening?
No, I do want to address a question about the high school and middle school not being on the same schedule. And we had an extensive conversation about that because we did poll both high school and middle school teachers, and there was a concern that just because the high school was bigger, they were going to get their way. When you started looking at our guiding principles of individual student growth for the kids, we realized that the two schedules could not be the exact same. The way that the high school runs their block versus the middle school, and we were not going to dictate, we being myself, and I'm going to include Dr. Worland in this conversation with me, we were not going to dictate that master schedule because we've never done that. The building and teachers have created that. So when we looked at the survey results and said, is there a win-win for everybody? We asked the two schools to separate and create the best schedule that they would know for themselves. So the teachers at the middle school voted every other day for the kids. High school voted keep it in 2-day segments with the Wednesday being the alternating day. And when that happened, then Mrs. Holman said, okay, what if we made Wednesday the alternating day so at least we get 60% of time together as opposed to just being completely rogue and doing whatever we want. So she tried to accommodate that. And we do understand that that the stress that the separating of the secondary schools. We've had a similar thing throughout the first semester if you had a middle school kid and a CBIS kid. It's some of those things. It's not a perfect system. We understand that. We want to get kids back in school. So if we can get the yellow, the hybrid is going to go away, we're coming back to school. And that's what we're going to really shoot for and hope for in our journey. But that is why we allowed the schools to separate, because we felt like based on what they knew for their kids individually in our guiding principle of individual student growth, that was the best. If a parent has a real concern, if something happens, just like we said for Cub Care, reach out to the building principal. We're going to try to be as flexible as possible. You heard Dr. Warland say, if you are a student with special education IEP or an ILP through English as a second language, we're going to let you come back to school more often. If we have parents saying, listen, this is a hardship on us, reach out to us. We've tried to be very flexible throughout this journey, and we'll continue to do that.
The last question I have, and it's more of just a suggestion, just kind of rethinking early release when we're also changing secondary schedules. They thought it might be difficult, again, for parents navigating through those different schedules.
And I think that's why we're looking at Cub Care being that 40-minute stopgap, so parents maybe won't see anything different. We'll come up with some creative solutions around that. So thank you, Mrs. Betts, for sharing that, and we're definitely thinking that as well.
Mrs. Betts, thanks for coordinating those comments. So on behalf of the board, I'd like to extend our warm wish to all of our Franklin family members of a very happy Christmas, a joyful new year, and we wish that you're safe. We'd like to see you next year. So we do have one more public comment. Sorry, Jason.
Actually, it's more of a question. As we look at hoping to be back to yellow here shortly, or by the time that maybe the second semester rolls around, the governor has made a comment that we need to wait 2 weeks before, like if say the county tomorrow or Wednesday was able to go yellow, we would have to wait another week before we could release or reduce the restrictions. Is that going to be this? Are we allowed to do the same if we go from yellow back to orange or even to red again? Will we give parents a 2-week window or a week window instead of like what we did a few weeks ago, where we 4 days and all of a sudden that same week, nope, we're back to hybrid. We need to have, I mean, by putting this out of the hybrid new, trying to get kids into class, yes, it's a startling thing, but I think it will allow us parents to work out the situations. I think there is a validity of the working together with the teachers, trying to figure out how we put that back in, but it's the other way around too for us parents. You know, if we go back to 4 days, 1 day off for the high school and middle school, great, but can we wait a week before we go back to 2 or 3 day, whatever it is, because to give the parents a little bit of time to rework their schedule if we have to go back to a lesser time. That's all I'm asking. Is that possible? Or are we told if it goes back from yellow to orange, we have to that next week go back to more restrictions? Has it been said, or has that question been asked with the health departments?
We were gifted with a sudden change.
Right.
That's what happened last time. You know, it was not our intent to do that. I think our desire was to try to finish out the year in that 4 days, but we were gifted with that. But we understand what you're saying, and we'll look to honor as much as we can and give as much lead time for make parents.
I understand that it hasn't been clear even on my end watching the speeches of the governor each week. It's like they don't want us to reduce the restrictions more than within that first week. but is it the same the other way around? And it's yes and no, and
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, thank you.
yep, thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thanks for your attendance.